I think we are live. So welcome all today to today's Coperitas webinar about data and transfer pricing. Coperitas is a transfer pricing tool developed by the TP experts of Quantera Global and with support of tax teams of multinationals. My name is Mike van Vuren and I am a TP specialist who has an enormous passion for technology as well. Today I'm joined by two of our business partners, Tim and John, of the Advanced Tax Group. We as Coperitas believe in collaborations to achieve maximum result for our clients, and therefore the Advanced Tax Group we believe is the perfect partner for us to support you with data problems and issues. Our goal of today is to show you that as a tax professional, there's really nothing to worry about when it comes to data and start using TP software. So if you have any questions during this webinar, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box. I think it's popping up on your right side of the screen. We aim to answer all your questions during this webinar, and remaining questions will be answered afterwards. If not submitted anonymously, of course. So let's kick off by introducing our guests of today, Tim and John.
Yes, thank you, Mike. My name is Tim van Uden. I am a partner tax and technology at the Advanced Tax Group. And together with me today is John Bruijns, and he's a tax and automation manager at the same company. And we have a direct tax and tax accounting tax process automation background. And our work consists primarily of process improvement and restructuring those processes combined with the right kind of automation. Our group consists of three companies: Advanced Tax Compliance, which focuses on the CIT compliance and tax accounting and tax reporting. Advanced Tax Solutions, which focuses on tax and finance automation. We develop solutions, implement a lot of different tools and platforms, and provide guidance on the road to digitalization and process improvement. And finally, there's Smarter Consulting, which focuses on lean process improvement, robotic process automation, so the so-called virtual employees, machine learning and artificial intelligence. And basically the combination of these three enable us to help clients not only to think about automation and the end-to-end approach, but also the processes and safeguarding of these processes. And this is also the combination that we believe is key in our partnership with Quantera and Coperitas. So by combining their solution with our knowledge on data and data gathering and data structuring, there's basically nothing to worry about, like Mike said. So by coincidence, also the name of this webinar. So if we can go to the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Then the agenda for today. So we'll discuss the process of obtaining data from ERP until uploading it into the Coperitas tool. We zoom in on different possibilities and show you an example of a robot processing actual data. So there would be a nice thing to wait for. And we end the webinar with a couple of common questions and of course the Q&A. And if you are interested in the vision behind Coperitas or the possible benefits of Coperitas regarding TP documentation process, I refer to our previous webinars, which can all be viewed on our website as well, coperitas.com. So let's kick off with the first part, the business case. It's always good to start with the problem we are trying to solve here. And what we experience is that a lot of tax teams are struggling with data handling before the data is actually ready for the TP reports in the end. So what we're looking at in the top part of your screen, most common formats are like Excel with large amounts of data and mapping Excels. So you need to combine all the data, make quite some calculations. And what we're trying to do is give you a bit of insight how you can solve and automate this process. And with Coperitas, we offer you a solution to automatically aggregate such data and do those calculations for you, which in the end result in a personalized report, so your TP documentation. So I think it's good to start with the process ERP to Coperitas, Tim.
Yes, thank you. Yes, like Mike mentioned, we're going to put the focus on data and how to come up with a good data strategy to get data in tooling, in this case, Coperitas. And I think that also worth mentioning is the people who have attended other webinars might recognize this overview and because we've used this before, but it is basically the foundation of our approach. And as this overview shows, we're not going to focus on the output side, so the right hand side, but we're going to focus on data and how to get that data into the solution. So what you see here is the various stations or steps, if you might like, in automation, divided in various areas within the record to report process. So on the left hand side, you see the unstructured and structured data sources. So the ERP systems, transactional systems, but also all the information that's stored on local drives or in other systems. And the third bucket, so the one to the right, shows the solution. In this case, Coperitas, and all the elements that are included in Coperitas. And basically, the one in between. There we see the data strategy or the data and process flow, which connects the both back and forth. Basically, to set the stage, what we typically see as a process within tax departments, also a little bit mentioned by Mike, but also when it comes to finance, HR, legal, or other departments within a company, is that process of data gathering. So the way this is effectuated within small, but also in really big companies, is with a lot of manual conversions by primarily use of email and or SharePoint, use of unclear data, lots of Excel-driven, error-prone and time-consuming steps, and without the further use of the information for other purposes, so for other tax-related items or for other reports. So this often results in a time-consuming process that is aimed at producing an output from scattered information instead of having the time to perform an analysis on the information and connect it to policies that have been set up or put consequences to that data and create that so-called global one version of the truth, like we like to call it. So that is a comprehensive process, which most of the times turns really ugly when there are questions asked by authorities or auditors, and you need to produce the supporting information of the last 4 years, or you need to go back through that whole process again to get it straight where you get those numbers from. So we're going to dive in more in those in the bucket 1, 2, and to give you a more overview where we see those challenges and how we see that process, how the process runs through these buckets. So if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So when we zoom in on these buckets, we see various challenges. And those challenges are in a current process, but are also really relevant when looking at automation. So overall, it is related to the question, what data can be produced from what system, and where does my data stem from, and how can we validate, combine, transform, and use that data for other purposes. So most of the times what we see is that companies have multiple ERP systems spread around the organizations, have or don't have a consolidation system in place, have various systems or ledgers for upstream or downstream business, fixed assets, and so on. And basically what you can think of is the variety of data and data sources that's required for the data gathering to provide, for instance, CBCR reporting. Who do you need to involve? Where's the data coming from? All these questions and all these challenges we see often at companies, and and that takes a lot of time to get it clear, but also to work with all the impediments that are there. So basically, that's what you see here, the challenges on systems, on data, and who needs to be involved and how can we approach this. What you also see in this overview is how we would approach it in a project. This is for this webinar, not per se something that we're going more on in depth, but basically we analyze the assist position, we pinpoint what data is necessary for your current process, and we analyze how we could leverage this from different systems and discuss the information with the right stakeholders to get at least a data-driven process in place for a test run and see what comes out of that. But for this webinar, we will not focus on the approach for every single bucket, but we just want to show you that there are various challenges per bucket, which we see a lot at companies. So if we look at bucket two.
Here.
A second challenge, and I think this is, in our opinion, the most time-consuming one, because at a certain time you have the information streamlined and in a way that you think that it should be, so it's facilitating your process, whether it's a lot of manual acquisition on that data or not, but basically you have that data in place to use for your process. But the most time-consuming part is actually gathering that data and combining data sets, slicing and dicing it up, that it can be used as the foundation for everything that you need to produce. Because even though these processes are, for instance, executed once a year, the run-through time of these processes are really long, and there are a lot of people in that chain of information. So you have to go to a lot of stages in the process, and have to contact a lot of people, whether the data is right and whether you've combined it the right way, and whether there has nothing been changed in that process with the data along the way. So that's a really big challenge, and we believe the most time-consuming one. And that's also what we're now going to show you in a couple of scenarios, how you can mitigate these challenges, or at least get more insights in these challenges.
And Tim, I also think that for the viewers is that it's all relative. So some companies have very strong finance departments which can deliver all data you need. And other companies has a very decentralized multinational setup, and then it's more time consuming to gather all that data from abroad and bring it together. So I think it's always relative. If it's already very streamlined, very minor improvements can be made. And the larger you are and the more decentralized you are, I think there are more benefits to this.
Definitely, and I think that also that's a really good point, because basically what we try to achieve through this webinar is that we help the viewers understand that it doesn't matter whether you're decentralized or centralized, or what your challenges are on data or the process to gather that data. There's always a way to start, and to at least already have some advantage in place on that, by using a tool or by leveraging the data that you already have. And it doesn't matter eventually if you're centralized or decentralized, because there's always a way to start. But it's relating to specific situations with clients.
Yeah.
Now, so that's a good one to bring us to the scenarios, because that's the next one. So thank you for that, Mike. What's really important here is that basically there are two things that we always do. Based on the current process that the client has, we mind map that process, but we also put on top of that the various challenges that they have in place. So also in prior webinars, we discussed that we have a couple of buckets that we then put on top of that process, being a data problem, a system problem, people problem, or a process problem. And by reducing it to those kind of labels, we can see what kind of solution would fit. Today we are focusing on that data and system issue, but within those challenges, we can always reduce that to 3 possible ways to leverage that. So what you basically see here, that this because this cumbersome process, as I described before, is most of the times the reasons that companies either go look for software solutions as a solution for everything, or believe that the way they are working now cannot be changed, and it's simply the way it is. And we're of the opinion that when you take that step back and make that blueprint and put those challenges on top of that, you can start with any of these buckets to work towards short-term or long-term improvements. So, for instance, if you have let's say if you have your challenge and requirements listed, and it's in one of those buckets. However, it's then unclear what whether the data is in place or what data is used in the process. You can still already start by using a tool that gives you control, workflow management, and helps you in other ways like document production, or all the data that you put in there from a starting point by reusing that data. So if you have a data challenge, it doesn't mean that you are limited to use a tool, because it can already provide you a lot of control in your process. And if we focus on the data gathering and structuring part, the digital strategy consists of these three options that you see in the screen, which can be combined or used separately depending on your situation. So the first one, manual data input. Basically, that's the basis one, where it can be in line with what I mentioned as an example, where you already start using the tool for your advantage on your process, but you still keep producing the data the way you did it before, because you know that the data that you receive, what you need to do, and it's manual. It takes a lot of time, but you keep doing the work and keep combining that information or gathering the information within your organization in the same way. The difference is then that all the data that you, for instance, then put into Coperitas can be used to not only service the financial information, but also, for instance, CBCR tables and documentation like local files and master files. Furthermore, this information is stored in that cloud-based centralized repository, and therefore structured and accessible for further reference. So if that question comes, give us the information of the last years or where did you base your information on, you can show that because it's in the system. And by rolling forward that data and or documentation, you already created more efficient process and also more consistency in the process. So keeping your process the way it is, but leveraging the backend with a tool can already give you some improvement in the process. A second scenario that we see, the data gathering systems, is that scenario around data gathering, where you have to go into the decentralized organization and gather that information. Is, for example, if you need to get information from every entity within your group, and you normally would do this by sending everybody a message with a file to complete. So you're sending an email with a file in there included, and you're saying, okay, please complete this. Then the tracking of this process is also managed separately, and when different versions come along, because you have to update a questionnaire with additional questions, for instance, and people break the files, it takes a lot of effort to get the information in a right format that you can use it. Furthermore, people do not provide the information, you have to chase them. And there's a lot of, most of the times we see that there's a lot of key man dependency in the various countries or at the various entities in place. So if there's a data gathering challenge within your organization, there are like a lot of platforms or solutions that, depending on, of course, your requirements, can facilitate this process. To give you an example, of a cloud-based platform that allows you to register legal and managerial entities and structures and users. On that platform, you can set up data templates, which you can send to everyone within your company to complete. On top of that, there's a workflow management and there's an audit trail, and people provide the information in a uniform and controlled way, and combine that with supporting documentation, which is stored in that same environment. So as that data is already structured, you can also draw up structured real-time reports, which you then can use for Coperitas. So for CBCR reporting, ask all the information in all your countries through data templates, automatically combines the information, and then you can use that basis to put in Coperitas for the actual analysis or for further use in documentation. So that whole process is then leveraged by a data gathering system or a data gathering tool. The use of these kind of data gathering tools and systems diminish also key man dependency, project management burden, and it mitigates errors and risks because you push people into a set process with a set format. And yeah, I think also by connecting it to Coperitas, the outcome and the production of the transfer pricing related deliverables can be arranged by push of a button. So if you are looking for let's say more transforming your current manual process in a more straightforward way, fast, future-proof way, then the third option being data transfer via robotics or let's say certain connectors would also be an interesting one. And that's definitely one that John can tell more of.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. So let's move on to John.
Hi, thank you for that. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, if we can go back one slide. Yeah, the third scenario, the data transfer combine connector scenario. Yeah, it can be divided as follows. Firstly, an option is connecting your tool, your transfer pricing tool, to the ERP system through an API, a so-called application programming interface. What this basically is a secure connection between two applications pushing and pulling data. However, we see that in a lot of cases, such an API simply does not exist. And if it is not desirable for the IT department, if it doesn't exist, it is not cost efficient to build such an API. So basically, in a lot of instances, this is not a possibility. Secondly, a suited and very customizable option to get the right data into your tool would be robotic process automation, abbreviation RPA. With RPA, you can get a robot to do all the manual tasks which humans normally do. The robot does this fast, without errors, and it can do it 24/7. So basically, the robot's like a digital employee. An example is that it could get your up-to-date ERP data every hour. So you always have the most recent ERP data for your files. Another example of RPA is a robot which scans invoices and converts this data to Excel, or it loads this data into the ERP system. So the robot can be used in many ways and in different processes. But if we take this and apply it to Coperitas, we can go to the next sheet. On this sheet, we see all the steps of a process, a sort of standard process, you can say, which starts with data and ends with the correct data loaded into Coperitas. So what happens here is the robot starts with collecting the data, the basic data sources. It can be Excel, it can be CSV, but it can also be an ERP system like SAP. And after the data dump is prepared, the robot can filter the data, for example, by entity or by reporting unit. After the robot has filtered, so the filter has been applied, the relevant data or the relevant transactions can be selected. For example, for transfer pricing, you probably don't want to file all separate intra-company transactions. So the robot can do this. After you have minimized and filtered this data, it could be the case that you still want to get the sum of certain transactions. The robot can also do this, and it can also make any other calculations necessary for the required data. Once the data is good enough or for submission, the robot can import the required data into the tool, in this case, into Coperitas. So the process you see here on this sheet basically illustrates how robotic process automation can fully automate manual and time-consuming tasks and prepare the required data for you. And it can do this 24/7, so you always have the latest data.
And John, maybe it's worth mentioning, so listeners hear you say obtaining data from ERP or starting at Excel. I think it's worth mentioning that no matter if you are fond of connecting such robot through an API with your ERP system, or you want to just request that data from the finance department, the starting point is as such flexible that it can also start just with the regular Excel sheets tax teams currently receiving, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It doesn't matter basically what the data source is. The robot can handle any data source. It can start with the data source regardless of the format, Excel, CSV, PDF even, but yeah, also ERP system. So, but yeah, that doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so I just talked about the process, but maybe to give you more insight, we have a demo of a simple robot taking data from Excel, combining the numbers, and finally loading this data into Coperitas.
So let's start up the video.
So what you see here is the interface of the RPA program called UiPath.
And after this point, when it now starts popping up screens, it's all automatic, right?
Yeah, from every action from now on is the robot performing actions. So there's no human actions at this point. So yeah, this is a simple robot which basically combined the figures or the data of several business units. It summed up the total, it calculated the total, and after that it loaded that data into Coperitas to produce an income statement for transfer pricing.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to mention that What John showed with this robot is that the process from starting from your regular Excel sheet you're currently receiving as a TP specialist or part of the tax team until the data is loaded into Coperitas. This is a small example and can be scaled, and I think that's also the beautiful part of the robot. So after this part, Coperitas comes to work with all the output of the data. But I think that's a good one for next webinars. Do you have anything to add further, John, or should we continue?
No, we can continue.
Great, thank you. Then let's go to the frequently asked questions. I think Tim is joining me on this one, or together with John. So to start with the first question, these are made from latest communications as well with tax teams and the input from all the participants. So the first question, Tim, what if an M&E has different ERP systems globally? That's a thing we hear a lot. They are worried about having different types of systems and combining all the data.
Yeah, this is definitely something that you see a lot, especially because companies have performed mergers, demergers, took over companies, expanded, created new kind of business units, etc. And what we typically see as an example is a lot of different SAP systems, because people tend to believe that if there's one SAP system that everybody who has SAP is the same, but we see that there might be 20, 30 different setups of those systems. And basically what we normally look at is whether there's a consolidation system in place. What we typically see these days is that companies already have combined those various SAP or Oracle systems by putting a consolidation system on top. So the way you can see this is that every system has its own chart of accounts, and the consolidation system on top of that has a master chart of account, and everything is already mapped to that. And what you need to analyze there is what the granularity of data is in your consolidation system, and whether you can use that. If the outcome is that you don't have a consolidation system, or the granularity of data is not sufficient, then in this case you would look at what you can retrieve more from the local systems or the local teams instead of the ERP systems, and see what they are already pulling out and the way they deliver it to you. And then if we revert it back to the three options that you saw, then you're talking more about the way you gather the data from your organization instead of from the ERP systems.
Yeah, so it's more focused on process in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because creating a lot of automation around a lot of different ERP systems would only create a maintenance monster. So that's not advised. Yeah,
can imagine. And if we build on top of that, I heard you also elaborating on consolidation software or ERP. Is there a preferred source, or is it linked to that updating part you just mentioned?
Yeah, it depends on, I think it always depends on the granularity of data. And the way you can see that is that if you look at your current process and what you need to produce, and all the elements in what you produce, if you revert it back to data and you establish what data can come from my systems theoretically, then you should take a look at, okay, if that is the case, does the consolidation software that we have in place give me, let's say, the movements that I need to see, or do I need to go back to the ERP system to get it in a lower detail, in a higher detail and a lower level? So that really depends on what your consolidation software can produce. And next to that, what you typically also see these days is a so-called EPM system, which is a combination of consolidation software with reporting on top of that, and that allows you to get more detail from the ERP systems in general. So it really depends on what your requirements are and what the system can give you, and that's most of the times a good discussion with the tax team as well as the most of the times finance teams who maintain the systems.
Okay, thank you. And I think we also tackled the next one I had in place. It's like if the stakeholders for the best success, most worries I hear from tax teams is, who do we need to get around this table to make this work?
Yeah, and that's a difficult one. I don't believe that this is a difficult one to answer, but what you typically see is that the tax department asks information and gets it in a specific way, and the message that we normally get when we start with automation is, this is what we get, and everything we ask is blocked, or we do not know what to ask or who to ask. We just get this from person A, and what you see is that when you analyze what data you need, and you get into the discussion with IT or finance, and you put them on the table with tax, and you explain what is needed, then most of the times people say, okay, we can draw up that report, or we need to go into that system, because eventually it saves them time as well. And so we always say that, okay, if you analyze that full process, then when it comes to the data sources, always make people attend to who are responsible for the systems, because they can immediately say what's possible or not possible. But most of the times what you see is that the tax team does not exactly know what to ask. So that's a discussion aside.
Yeah. So it's more in the what to ask and what the process is, apart from a standard list of stakeholders. I think you're right there. Yeah. And then the question is, when is the right time to start? There's always things happening within the M&E, so updating of SAP systems, ERP systems, or maybe migrating into one system. Does that block such processes?
Well, you have to take it into consideration, same as when you're restructuring your whole business. So if you're saying that we're going to get rid of a part of the structure, or we're going to let's say take over another company, these things you need to take into consideration. But by taking that step back and looking at the full process, and then you can basically start with anything. If you, let's say you start with a tool that can already leverage your current process on documentation, on the production of documentation, then you can leave the data part for now as it is, because you're, let's say, migrating to a new ERP system. So you can already start by making your life easier by creating more controls in your process, workflow management, but also get people already aligned on a tool, and then the data will follow when that ERP system is updated or migrated. And when it comes to your structure, if you obtain new companies or you clean up the structure, these are typically the things that are that can be done during a process where you already have a tool in place, because you can then either scale up the scope of the tool or scale it down. So basically we never see any blockers, except from when people say that that they are going to diminish the structure in a way that there's nothing left, or that there are no people anymore that can tell us what happens, that everything needs to be brought back to the start. That's obviously a blocker, but most of the times you can start by already short-term creating advantages by tooling or data automation.
Yeah, and I think also getting involved in that discussion with migrating of your financial systems. If you're, as of now, not getting the right data, make sure you're getting it after the migration of the system.
Yeah, definitely. You can if you get into the discussion at the right time, then you can at least make sure that the granularity of data, which we mentioned with the consolidation systems, can be arranged. That you already talk about that report that you need for your whole process, and that you can already hook text up into that process.
Yeah, and I think that also leads, it's more bit of a statement, we hear a lot, unsure if we can deliver all required data. And yeah, maybe that's an easy one, that it also comes down to the previous discussions. Make sure you have all data within your company, and obviously it is there, but sometimes you need to make some, I think, can imagine some changes, management changes, to get all the right data.
Yeah, you can only do that if you know what your requirements are. So you first always take a step back and look at your process, look at what data is involved in that process, and what parts of the data are leveraged now, and in what way, and whether you can then say, okay, we have these gaps, and can we cover these gaps with specific data, or do we need to do things manually, or do we need to get things from documentation, etc. But if you don't have the process clear, then you cannot decide on whether you can deliver all required data.
Yeah, agree. So then we move on to the bucket 3, and why there's actually nothing to worry about. Tim and John talked you all through the data gathering part, data processing part, and loading into Coperitas. And why do I think that Coperitas is the tool to work with in this sense, is that in our vision, we think that flexibility is key. So we've built the system in a way that all the required data fields, so in example, your P&L, balance sheet, cash flows, all things you would like to include, are flexible, and it can be set up by the user itself. So you're also in control of the system. So you determine which data you think is mandatory for your TP reporting, or data you wouldn't like not to include. And as we talked you through today, the data management part, we've covered it with ATG in that sense. And I think the other benefits are gaining efficiency regarding your TP documentation process, and it can also already start before finalizing that data process. And at last, increase your control over the process. So the system is also covered with an audit trail and has workflow functionalities. But that all is relevant when you have clear what your process is and where do you want to improve that process. And maybe key takeaways for today is to start small, one step at a time. We know that starting with TP tooling is a part of data discussion and the output itself. Normally, most people focus on the output, the reports going, get all the filings done, but also take time to take a step back, look what's most important for now and what's smart to start with. And that's what we want to tell you. So focus on the process itself, and do not always focus on the blockers, but use the opportunities to start. And then you'll see that the tooling can also improve your process in the end. Then the proposition we have of Coperitas, and the detailed explanation of our proposition is also included in our previous webinars. So the main message in this one is that if you start using Coperitas as a tool, there are usually 3 steps to take: the technical setup, the data conversion part, and of course the consultancy part. So the data and output should be aligned with the actual economic circumstances. And what I want to tell is whether you want to do most of the work yourself, option A, you want to do a combined effort, option B, or you want to fully outsource it. It's all possible. We are very flexible in that sense. But in every option you choose, it is possible to get support of ATG for your data problems, and let them help you to smooth out the data process. So for further detailed information of this overview, I refer to our previous webinar, where we explain it in detail. Then I think there's one thing left. So before ending this webinar, hopefully you learned something new. I was very excited for this, and I think, yeah, I enjoyed it. And I hope Tim and John did as well. So please follow us on our LinkedIn page to keep updated regarding upcoming webinars. The recording will be sent per email and shared on LinkedIn as well. If you have colleagues or relations which are also interested in this topic as well, you can share it. If you got a feeling that Coperitas and the collaboration with ATG can be something for you, feel free to contact us for a demo or brainstorm session. We are happy to brainstorm with you on your current processes and possible improvements you can make. And lastly, I will thank you, Tim and John, for your time and efforts. And
thank you.
I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and one side comment, all questions asked in the Q&A that we haven't answered during the session, we will answer obviously after the session.
Yeah, so thank you all, and have a good day. See you next time. Bye-bye.